Hi, everyone. Welcome. Do the two of you want to go ahead and kick it off?
Hi, we're Ilyas and Kiriana.
I'm from St. Petersburg, Russia, and I have been living in United States almost 2.5 years.
And I'm from Oregon, a third-generation Russian Orthodox Old Believer, meaning my grandparents immigrated to the U.S. We're also president and vice president of the Clackamas Community College's Slavs and Friends Club, a place for learning about and sharing our Eastern European cultures. Last October, we had a club movie showing the Academy Award-winning documentary, 20 Days in Mariupol. It opened our eyes to the reality of war, seeing it from the point of view of Ukrainian civilians who are living through the start of the war. We watched hospitals get bombed, people fearing for their lives in the streets, humanitarian aid getting cut off, and tanks invading the city. It made us feel like we were living through the horrors of war, and we knew that we had to put on an event to discuss this current issue that's still happening today.
The reason why I come in United States from Russia in 2022 was the beginning of the conflict that keep going right now. Today we would like to discuss what is happening now in third year of the still ongoing war.
As Russians, we also felt a need to educate ourselves and others about it, and how to support the indirect and direct victims of war. We also aim to be more conscious of the calculated news stories that we could be receiving from the larger social forces around us, which plays a part in the war. We also hope to take a look at the war and learn from it for our own country and for ourselves, to learn love and empathize with people who are different from us, to be conscious of possible propaganda, and to understand the truth of waging war so peace can be achieved instead. Today, we'll look at this tragedy from only our side, though the best minds in the world are trying to stop this war with unlimited resources, and we'll discuss why they can't.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to 3 years later, a conversation on the Russian-Ukrainian war. My name is Miranda James. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the coordinator of the Multicultural Center here at Clackamas Community College. I also have the honor of advising the Slavs and Friends Club and working with Ilyas and Kiriana. And I am moderating today's panel, so go me. Just thank you for laughing. So thank you so much to the folks who are here in the room today. We have such a lovely audience, and more people than I think maybe me and the students thought would be here. And thank you to everybody who is also watching on YouTube. We appreciate you just as much. So we've got a lot to talk about, and we've got a wonderful group of folks who are here to engage in this conversation with us today. But who's here? Who are we talking with? I think that, yeah, we should meet them. So I have fancy introductions for each of them, but then I'll throw it to each of our panelists to share anything else that you feel like I've missed, or anything else that you'd like to share with our viewers today, or with each other, because these folks just met, some of them just met each other an hour ago. I did no meet and greet before. So yeah, I'm going to start with Dr. William Comer. Dr. William Comer is professor of Russian language and culture at Portland State University. He also directs PSU's federally funded language flagship program, which allows undergraduates to develop professional level proficiency in Russian while they pursue the major of their choice. He has been following political and cultural developments in Russia and Eastern Europe since he first studied in the Soviet Union in 1982.
Which just tells you that I've been around for a very long time.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to introduce Ilyas Muhammadov. Ilyas is the founder and president of the Slavs and Friends Club here at CCC. He's been a student here for 2.5 years after immigrating from Russia to the US. And he is a student in our, I don't know the full name, the WET program. What does that stand for?
It's water environment program that I graduate this year. So, and yeah, just I get I get fully educated in the United States. Yeah, I will say.
Thanks. We've also got Kiriana Chernyshov. Oh. fan club. Kiriana is the vice president of the Slavs and Friends Club at Clackamas Community College. While undecided, she is interested in studying social justice and community building, as well as creating a sense of belonging on campus. We're so excited to have her on the panel because she is someone who has Russian heritage due to her grandparents and their journey on how they made it here, but she's born and raised in the U.S. What else do you want the audience to know? Okay. Thanks for being here, Kiriana. Next on my list, I've got Julia Brockdorf. Julia is a psychotherapist and dietitian. She provides frontline psychotherapy and delivers critical aid. You just got back from a trip you were telling me earlier. And Julia is also the co-founder of a nonprofit called Dawn and champions local and international global security efforts. Okay. I'm excited to hear about the things that you have to share with us, even if some of them are sad. And then last but not least, we've got Almir Methavdewich. Thank you. I only know one language. Almir is a Spanish faculty member here at Clackamas Community College. He's studied Russian culture from elementary school through university, culminating in a master's degree in Russian, East European, and Eurasia studies from the University of Oregon. He previously taught Russian and has firsthand experience living, studying, and working in Russia. In his previous role as the language lab manager at Shemeketa Community College, he helped numerous refugees from Ukraine. Almir, I also know that this topic is deeply personal to you, this idea of war and refugee stuff, because you were a teenager in the Bosnian Civil War back in the 90s. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to share with folks. Okay, great. So these are our panelists. We felt like a good place for us to start this conversation today was actually setting the historical context. Because, there might be folks in the room who are like, how did we get here? What is going on? Where is Russia? We don't really learn geography in the US. So I'm going to actually ask, Will, if you don't mind starting us off with, what's the historical relationship between Russia and Ukraine? And how did we even get to Russia entering the Ukraine? Like, how did we get to where we're at today?
Okay, I'm going to try to do this 1,000 years of history in 10 minutes. So it'll be an overview. And I will try not to go on too long, but as a professor, that is one of those professional problems I have. But I'll try to keep it in control. This first map is just kind of showing where Ukraine was in 1991, the end of the Soviet Union, right? We see the familiar shape of the country. I think the big takeaways that I'd like you to be thinking about are just the breadth of Ukraine east to west, right? And that breadth is really going to have a breadth and diversity of peoples and historical experiences. And that's going to be really important for the story of how we get to this war and invasion. Americans don't much care for history either, and that was so 5 minutes ago, and you're still remembering it. You have to come at this from the point of view of people who have been writing their own history on this land for over 1,000 years, right? And so they've got the kind of documentation and historical legacy and that connection with real deep history. And that really deep history is one of those things that forms outlooks, it forms how we think about the present, in ways that typically when Americans, and I'm going to say Mr. Witkoff, who goes to Moscow, doesn't really think about history. And so we're really kind of missing each other culturally when we don't have this in mind. So this is roughly 1000 AD, right? What's going on in this part of Eastern Europe? You'll notice that the word Moscow isn't on this map because Moscow really isn't anything in around 1000 AD. What we do have are collections of cities, city-states, small political entities who interact with each other in different ways. Mostly they go fight each other, and everybody wants to take the prize, which is Kiev, which is kind of right here in the center of the map. I'm not sure that that's going to show up very well. And so you get this kind of culture that starts here, and that long history is something that Moscow kind of gloms onto and has been really turned into a vehicle for propaganda, particularly in the last 25 years. There's an enormous change in the story, and who gets to own the history of this area that's in green on the slide. And now we're going to jump 700 years, and it's 1649, and this area in green is really where the first kind of what modern historians call modern Ukrainian political history starts, where you have a formation of people who are coming together militarily to defend an identity that they have. And that identity is connected by language, by shared customs, by religious traditions, so they're Eastern Orthodox, and they're defining that against their neighbors, right? And to the east, they have Moscow, which is a very powerful neighbor, but not nearly as powerful as Poland, Lithuania, that is to the north and to the west. And that's the real power center that this beginning Ukrainian state is defining itself against. And then to the south, we have the Ottoman Empire, which has taken over the kind of north shore of the Black Sea. And that Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, right, so at 1650, they have just kind of united politically. They are still at the height of the Counter-Reformation. They have flirted with Protestantism and have rejected it and have gone very strongly Catholic in identity. And it's against that kind of religious cultural mix that the people in this eastern part of what was that Commonwealth start to define themselves. And they start looking for political allies to fight the stronger power. And they look at Moscow, and Moscow has some advantages, right? They are Christian, they are Orthodox, right? So there's that shared thing. And they make an agreement in 1654 to fight the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth together with Moscow. And that's going to be a moment that turns Ukrainian history and also allows Moscow to think like, we own you. You're ours, whether the Ukrainians want that or not. And we can see kind of a map of the Russian Empire a century or two later, right? All of that deep pink territory, right, is the Moscow state, which has come and taken over that Ukrainian early political formation. And then you'll see what's going on down here above the Black Sea. Yeah, so not working. Which is a series of numbers and years of how the Russian Empire conquers territory from the Ottoman Empire under the reign of Catherine the Great. And this will go into Russian imperial history textbooks and into Soviet history textbooks as the Russian conquest, right? Even though who's actually the ground soldiers shooting in this wars, right? I've not researched that, but one can imagine that it's a fair number of locals who have been taken from southern Russia and from Ukraine, what we would call Ukraine now, to fight in these wars of conquest. At the same time, we also have the Russian Empire dismantling Poland and taking bits and pieces of Poland in three what are called partitions that essentially dismantle Polish power. And so 1772, some chunks come in, 1793, some more, 1795, they get the rest. And that enters the empire as well. And that's territory that's always seen as like, not really ours, but we have it, as opposed to this territory of north of the Black Sea, which really kind of enters the historical imagination as ours from a kind of Russian Empire point of view and Soviet Empire point of view. And that's going to be important for some of the rhetoric coming out of Russia now as to like why we should get this back, whether they should or not. End of World War I, there's a lot of instability going on in this part of the world. Political power changes in Kiev seven times in the period 1917 to 1921, right? Think about that. Political government change 7 times, right? That's a lot of change, right? That's a lot of back and forth. And trying to figure out what is going to be Ukraine going forward into the 20th century. The Soviets don't really think so much about ethnicity because everybody is class-based, and class is more powerful than nationality. At least that's the theory behind the kind of Marxist socialism under Lenin. The other thing to point out is that large parts of this, and I'm still doing it, can't learn, are really going to go off to Poland during the interwar period. And so the Ukrainians living in those territories will have a different political experience of being a minority in Second Republic Poland. And then, so that territory gets united after World War II. That's a whole nother set of stories and feelings of betrayal. But at the end of the Soviet Union, the one thing that is very true is that the people in Ukraine have a referendum and they vote not to be part of the Soviet Union. They want out, right? They really do want to be politically different. And you can see even to the area of Crimea, right, 54% of the population votes to leave, right? They want to be separate, right? So there really is that kind of groundswell of identity idea, like we have to form something else. And I tossed this map in as well because this was the first presidential election after the kind of fall of the Soviet Union, 1994. And what's interesting is that the incumbent president loses. Power can change through elections, right? That sounds not so miraculous to us, but in post-Soviet spaces, that is an interesting phenomenon, right? And shows something about the power that can happen at the ballot box and in elections. And the other thing you can see is exactly how split the country is in 1994, right? So the voting percentages, the furthest west and the furthest east, they're mirror images of each other, right? So these are two parts of the country that like really don't see the world in black and white, but each has flipped the colors. The center of the country, it's more nuanced, who gets to go where. Am I at 10 minutes yet? I must be right about it. Almost to the end of our story here. That kind of political power through voting continues. 2004, there's the final election for Kuchma. He's got a hand-picked successor that he'd like to put into power. The fudging of elections is so bad and so obvious that people come out on the street, and you have this first Orange Revolution in December 2004 to 2005. People really, really protest against this faked election, and the second round gets run again, and a new candidate wins. And that's a sense of like, there is power to the people coming out and protesting and wanting their rights to have elections that really do reflect the popular feeling. And in 2004, this isn't going on in Moscow, right? This isn't going on in Russia. There's never that kind of united feeling against kind of political power. And Moscow, if it's doing anything in this time period, is consolidating power and consolidating the media and holding on to power. And so it's important to recognize that kind of democratic, small d feeling that goes on in Ukraine that's so threatening in many ways to the Kremlin. And it's even more threatening 10 years later when Yanukovych, who does win elections free and fair in 2010, refuses to sign an agreement to essentially affiliate closer with the European Union. And him turning his back on that agreement really gets seen by the population as a betrayal of Ukraine's place in Europe. And you have thousands and thousands of people come out on the central square in Kiev to protest. It goes on for quite a long while. Yanukovych decides, I'm going to try violence to suppress this. It doesn't work. He winds up fleeing. And this is really the moment when that kind of small d democratic feeling kind of pushes over. This is also the time period by which, in the Kremlin looking at this, panic is going on, right? They don't see this as the free exercise of democratic forces. They see this as chaos. And they've put down protests in 2011-12 in Moscow that were much smaller than this, but they've been put down. And this is seen at the moment when, like, we can interfere in Ukraine and probably get away with it. And that's when the takeover of Crimea happens. And that essentially sets us up for what we're going to talk about today. So I stop.
No, thank you so much for sharing that history with us. Yulia, I know that you have some thoughts as well.
Thank you very much for doing such a valuable overview. I wanted to contribute also that during the World War II, when we talk about liberation by Russian army, over 50% of Russian army were Ukrainians. And Russia has a history of utilizing, doing 2-for-1, like what they're doing with Buryatia people and in current war against Ukraine. They are bringing ethnic minorities to use in a fight against another aggressor. So Ukrainians were disseminated in the war of World War II, and now that's happening and repeating itself again. And Russia made so many attempts to Russificate, and it's just impressive to see the slide of how many people in Ukraine have risen up to say, yes, we want independence and nothing to do with Russian influence, taking into account that there have been so many different historical efforts to subjugate and to Russificate Ukrainian populace. We have 1932 repression, and then through the Holodomor, 1932, 1933. We had repression by Stalin in 1937. We had such a large population killed as part of Red Army. And what happened to Crimean Tatars, how they were forcibly removed and taken out of their native lands. So these are the various tools that Russia is going to use force. And also soft tools. I personally grew up in the eastern part of Ukraine, currently under occupation. And guess what language we spoke there?
Russian.
Ukrainian.
Oh, okay.
We spoke Ukrainian, neighbors spoke Ukrainian. There was one neighbor that spoke Russian, and she was a transplant. So during the repression in 1937, many people were forcibly either killed or transplanted to Siberia or other parts of Russia, and people were moved into those areas. So then Russia can come in and says, oh, we come here to rescue our people that we forcibly put there. So Ukrainian culture, music, and cultural pearls existed from the beginning of Kievan Rus. And now, right now, I don't know what, of course, happening in that part of my homeland, but hopefully I will have a chance to walk those fields and those steps and smell the air again. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Coleman.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that Elias Kiriana and I were talking about is just like how disruptive war is and how I feel like, I guess for me, I feel like, well, one, in the US, depending on your age, I'm 32, so I was born in the early 90s, like war is something that has happened over there. And it's something that has happened away. I think that depending on where you're at in the US, war is maybe not positive in the way that, like, you know, a theme park is positive, but this idea of, like, you know, we do this thing for this positive outcome to protect freedom is a big thing that's talked about here. Sorry, part of my question is in here, but yeah, it's yeah. I'm trying to think if I want to go in the direction of war first. We'll go to war in a minute, but one thing that I want to talk about, because the two of you have kind of started this conversation around, you know, who is telling the story and what is the story that is being told. And I think that that's a big question that a lot of people have today is, like, who is telling the story? What is the story being told? And who do I know who to trust? Like, who do I know whose story to listen to and believe in, or whose story influences how I feel or how I believe? And I want to throw it to all of our panelists. When you're reading news or stories or narratives, like, what do you consider when you're looking at news sources? Where do you find your news? How do you develop your sense of what's true and what's not true, or who's trustworthy and who's not trustworthy? Yeah, please.
Just a quick introduction. You said something. You're 32 years old. It was about 30 years ago that I was studying a bachelor's degree in Russian studies in Spain at University of Granada, and we had a panel like this. It was a conversation about Serbo-Croatian language, and I, as a native speaker of Serbo-Croatian language, they called me. They volunteered me to participate in the conversation, and we had a Serbian student next to me, and the moderators were Russians and Ukrainians, and I remember vividly. The conversation derailed from Serbo-Croatian, Bosnian, Montenegrin into differences between Russian and Ukrainian language, and that was my, as a matter of fact, that was my first I was witnessing the first microaggression against Ukrainian people, Ukrainian language. In the same panel, they started laughing about the existence of Ukrainian legend. They were so dismissive. And I remember my professor, Margarita, she turned to me and she told me like this in a voice like, do you see what they're doing to me? And I will never forget that, because at the time, I didn't pay too much attention to this, because I came from my own war, and we, famously Balkan people, they immediately fight about stuff. And I didn't see that as a potentially dangerous for relationship between Ukrainians and Russians. But after that, I went to Russia, and I spent many years working between 2000 and 2010. I spent many years working in studying in Russia. And one of the things that I did notice was how that aggressiveness against Ukrainian identity grew in different periods. So early 2000s, there was a stereotypes about the Ukrainian people, about Ukrainian statehood. But then after certain events that happened, like 2004, the NATO expansion toward the Baltic states, that was the first time I've heard expression like preemptive attack. And if it's 2004, there was a conversation about preemptive attacks toward terrorists in America. Right. And they took that rhetoric, that discourse, and they were started talking about the attacking countries that are alienating. They're abandoning the Soviet sort of area of influence. And Ukraine was okay by then. They were cooperating. In my experience, I did witness racism toward other ethnic minorities, especially from Central Asia, and LGBTQ community, obviously, or students from Africa. But there was stereotypes toward Ukrainians, but the things change after 2007. I remember that a Munich conference where Putin said that enough is enough to the West, and he blamed West for expansion and all these political things. And Ukrainians always wanted to be independent, in the sense of, like, there was a lot of cooperation between Ukraine and Russia, but they always wanted to be their own country. And I remember starting the war in the 5 days war between Russia and Georgia, 2008, if I'm not wrong. The first time I've heard people in Russia say, "Можем повторить," we can repeat it, meaning we can repeat the Second World War. We can get to Berlin if we want. And that was about that time. That was the first time I've heard that Ukrainians are оболваненные русские, which means they are оболваненные. I don't know how to translate. Maybe is it dumbed down? People who were brainwashed Russian, and that was like this was already serious to me, because that was the first kind of signs of serious aggression toward the Ukrainian identity. And then we had, Euromaidan you were mentioning, and that was the beginning of the war, 2014. And there was a completely dehumanization of Ukrainian people and the identity and the agency. I remember in many occasions I've heard being just dismissive toward Ukrainians as no people. And then Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, published the letter in June of 2021, claiming that Russians and Ukrainians are one people. This is a completely Hitlerian idea, one folk, right? One people, and they belong to us. And after that, the war just started in February 22. But the most shocking thing to me was like that slow and dehumanization of Ukrainian people, in the sense that in order to attack the Ukrainian, they actually went, and the discourse at the time was, we're fighting Nazis in Ukraine. And they took the Stepan Bandera, which is a historical figure. Now, it's not that important, but they were, and even still today, they're not fighting Ukrainians, they're fighting Nazis. And those who resist their dominance, they're Nazis. And this is the clear case how the political discourse can turn into a war, and how they can justify the war against the Ukrainians. But to me, the most ironic thing is that there was a catchphrase in Russian language, мы можем взять Kiev за 2 дня. We can take Kiev in 2 days. I'm sorry, in 2 to 3 days. And 2 to 3, I've heard that so many times. And look at us, 3 years after Ukrainians resisting, that Kiev in 3 days, it proved to be impossible, because Ukrainian people do resist the Russian aggression. So I'm glad that we're here. I really hope the war stops very soon, but I'm glad that Ukraine resists this aggression. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. I'm noticing, for the story that you're sharing is it's slow, of like this information that is being shared, and this perspective that's being shared. I think, at least as it pertains, I'm a big fantasy reader, and the way that I feel like conflict comes up in fantasy novels is like one day, like one guy is like, rah, and they do a thing. But in our day-to-day lives, that's not what's. Sometimes it feels that way, especially depending on how distant you are from a conflict. But it's starting with little comments and little beliefs.
And this is what I don't like, the jokes like Canada for 51st state or anything like that, because from small things grow, and people are always susceptible to. We are just humans. I've seen that in Bosnia, the political violence creates. You can't recognize people once the political violence erupts. So, and that what I was witnessed in Russia. So yeah, unfortunately.
And it's such a valuable point you're making about the slow and pervasive experience of indoctrination growing up in the east of Ukraine and also being born in the west of Ukraine. I experienced that during USSR times as a child growing up in Ukraine. And Ukrainian language, just for context, was attempted to be outlawed by Russia 134 times. So to speak Ukrainian is an act of heroism. And when we say even just like Russia entering Ukraine, I would take a question to the word enter, because we did not open the doors and invite Russia to enter and come and have a kumbaya with us. Ukraine was brutally invaded with rape, with tortures, with killing, with using the type of weaponry that is considered to be a war crime to be used. So this is an ongoing, intentional attempt to erasure of particular cultural identity and existence of the people. We call it genocide.
And if I can just add this, in my experience, because I only moved in academic circles in Russia, many of that aggression was committed from in academic circles, which is kind of disappointing, because you would expect that in academia, in school, people would be more aware of the things. And You mentioned the Holodomor. I had a really dear to me supervisor in Russia at the Academy of Anthropology. And I remember talking about Holodomor, and I mentioned it, and there in the office said, well, we were victims too. You know, you see, like the Holodomor affected between 1932 and 1933, up to 10 million people died, rough estimates, right? But now you're dehumanizing the victims too. It says it wasn't only them, it was us too, because Stalin went against us too. It's just, you know, those small things that, but at that time I didn't pay too much attention, and obviously I wouldn't be able to change anything. But to me, it was academic circles is, unfortunately, in my experience also in former Yugoslavia, academic circles where those who produce that kind of narrative, nationalist narrative and discourse that turn out to be, you know, at the end turn out into violence. So yeah.
And it's interesting, being on the front lines, working shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainian defenders, there is this idyllic sometimes narrative comes in, well, these are Ukrainians, these are Ukrainian language trying to hang on to the idea of the state. A lot of soldiers defending Ukraine come from the parts of Ukraine that were under Russian influence for a long time, so their primary language is Russian. So these are Russian, oftentimes speaking persons who are standing, who are risking their life, who are fighting with valor to defend Ukraine. They're learning Russian as they go. Some of them starting to learn, they're learning Ukrainian as they go. Some of them started to learn Ukrainian since the full-scale invasion or the invasion of 2014. So for them, Ukrainian is something they attempt to learn, but right now they're just doing their best by fighting.
And in addition to that, the victims of Russian aggressions are mostly Russian-speaking Ukrainians, because the eastern Ukraine was heavily Russian-speaking. So you see, the pretext of getting is there to protect Russian language, and they're protecting Russian language by killing Russian speakers, Ukrainian Russian speakers, which is very ironic to me. And that's the discourse, that's the rhetoric right now in Russia, and hopefully it will change one day, but...
Yeah. Elias, I know that you're still keeping, you keep up, well, you watch Russian news still, right? Or Russian news sources. I guess, do you mind talking a little bit about what that experience, like being here and consuming US news, and then also still keeping up with Russian news, and also you still have community and family and friends back there as well. Like, yeah, can you talk a little bit about like what all of that is like?
Yeah. So I don't know what to start with. Okay, I've always like tried to explain the war. It's not like just people who, you know, like who is president or whatever who send the military to do this. It's also people. So, and if we talk about people like me, so just if you imagine, it's very hard to understand in United States maybe, but in Russia territory, include Ukraine too, I think. So it's like the 3 times during 100 years, during 1 century, country is changed. So first we have a Russian Empire, then we have a revolution, and we have a Soviet Union for 80 years. And if we take like just time from 1900 to 2000, in this like period, we changed like 3 countries. So and
right, you were born under one. You were born.
Yeah,
under...
we have some people who died in like 2000, for example, who live, for example, or who born in Russian Empire, live whole Soviet Union, and then died in third country. It's real country. It's like it's everything is changed, like political, idea and stuff. So this is kind of just can imagine what's happening in humans' brain, that it's not like change this fast. I mean, you can imagine that if, for example, I don't know, like I think it's kind of become the same if you like, let's imagine, yes, if you travel to different state and start to live there, you don't know what's happened, what's going on, and especially in United States when you have like different law. So and you start to like live in your life with new law, whatever, in new like new life and new social network around you. So this is, I think, happened with human in Russia. I mean, with the population. Again, and why from this step I want to go next. So people who live like long time in Soviet Union, and if you know like Soviet Union's become more like kind of belonging to propaganda. They always said it's like United States. It's like the worstest place in the world or whatever. So this we need to fight with them. We need to again like hate them. Like all the culture, all the like international knowledge, whatever. Like for science, for the for everything. Like it's super kind of bad that you can't really have it. So and I heard whatever probably it's happened. I think in Ukraine too, in 70s maybe 60s. Yes, when it's become like hot time of Cold War, I will say like that. So like people really hide some like some music from the European side or from United States and listen at home because they can't do anything with that because can come like some military not military the police or whatever and they can put you in jail. So and for this reason people kind of try to I don't want to say that, but you try to avoid that can hurt you and try to follow what can like give you benefits. So and benefits give what? Give what propaganda said. If you follow the rules, like Soviet Union, the best country of the world, you can also actually have a lot of benefits, and many people like follow like that. So and just imagine in just the 1990s, Soviet Union is broke, and same people with same mind, with same like ideas, they moved to new country that's supposed to be like a commercial country. I mean the economics is supposed to change. It's become like more open mind, whatever the country was a lot of like American company come, European company come. In 1994, I think you can find in internet in Moscow, we have like line, I don't know how many, like 20,
a lot of people. Yeah.
A lot of people stayed there because like people in Russia probably like really want to become like part of like universe. I mean part of the world. They want to be like open mind and they want to like become also go to McDonald's, go to different like different places where everybody goes. So and right now what's happened from 2014 I will say when all this like orange revolution come in Ukraine, again because it's very hard, I will say, imagine in United States that if you switch the channel and United States have like maybe 100 of those, but in Russia we don't have like hundreds, maybe we have like 50, maybe less, maybe 20. I don't want to say the number, but idea is like all the channels, I mean like TV channels what we have, have like same instruction how to inform people about everything what's happening in the world. So and for this,
it's controlled.
It's controlled, yes. So and if you again imagine, you can like switch in one channel, but when people like in nice suits talking like between each other and said, okay, like Ukraine is like the worstest country in the world. We have to fight with them and stuff. So and then you move to a different channel, and there are like some people, like some workers who work somewhere like in a field, and they also talking between each other. I mean, just what I want to explain. Different people with different kind of education level, different like what they do, so they can talk about same, and it's kind of change completely your mind. I mean, not like most of people mind, yes, that how to like how you can like believe if in different people in different like time, so they say like same things. So and all like independent journalists and all independent channels, it's become like closed immediately after hot war start in 2022. And I just wanna explain my kind of feeling when I in 2022 have like watched the TV again, like some show that Russian propagandist is called Solovyov. So he's explaining him like studio about like what's happened, what's going on. And if you watch like maybe 10 or 20 minutes, they look so nice. I mean, they talk so like like kind of smart, and and they talk that whatever they do, it's fine, it's okay. So, and after 10, 20 minutes, you start to believe them. And this is kind of unbelievable how human brains work, how you can like believe in something like happen completely like weird, but you start to believe them just because, like you have kind of watching the different, you watching like and thinking like they can't lie because,
Right.
like
You look nice and you look
Yeah.
professional and
Yeah, they
you're
look professional,
well-spoken and you're educated.
for sure. And most of them, it's like popular people also. I mean, you know them, you think like they can't lie, but they lie. So, and for this reason, I just wanna again keep in my mind all this time that okay, white is white, black is black. So kill people, invite to and for morning in a different country, it's never supposed to happen like at all. So, and for this reason, I think keeping this just in mind, have a kind of what I call like the very strong, whatever maybe yours, like understanding how world is work. So like probably you can like very easy to understand it. And what I want to say right now, after 3 years war is going on, I will say it's not become so popular. Like so when it start, propagandists in Russia, they can keep lying in a TV and much people believe. But after, like 3 years, it's very hard to do that. So, and right now, more people who go to war in Ukraine, they not like really believe to propaganda, not really believe to what government say. Most of what they go for money. So this is like, for this reason, I will say a lot of people in Russia who go to war, they must have gone not for idea, they go there because economic situation in Russia is so bad that people can't earn like $20,000 per. So if they sign contract with Russian army, they get like $20,000. In Russia, it's like so big money to do it once, and then every month they also have like, I will not say how
Other
much,
benefits.
but
Benefits.
not benefits, but they have like salary, so they can like help to. And also, I will say in Russia, government very try to keep it in mind that they can't broke this like social contract. That if they come to war, if they died, like the family, they for sure have money. So, and for this like kind of relationship between government and social, like how it's work. So the government give money. Social kind of work, but exactly what we mentioned before, in Russia people so like tired, I will say, about like what's going on, like in 100 years we have a three country, and they not really kind of have a, how it's called, the mind that critic mind, yes.
I mean, it's
Critical thinking.
Critical thinking,
Yeah.
yes. Critical thinking is completely like shut down because yes, like you don't understand what's going on. So, and yeah, and again, like if we talk about what's just one generation, I'm born also in end of the Soviet Union, and like I'm first generation where mine like parents or grandparents teach me how to do that. I mean, how's life going on, and they teach me how life going on in Soviet Union.
Totally.
So but I'm living in completely different country. So, and this is kind of I mean, just
yeah. Well, and it sounds like part of what you're talking about is for you, and thinking about news and what you believe in, is there's the story that you're being told and that feels good and believable, but then there's this part in your brain that says, nah, something's not quite sitting right. Like, and I would say that like something's not quite sitting right is rested in your values around like, and yeah, you've talked about like, oh, do I want to be a person who is fighting in a war? Like that doesn't align with my values, and so then how do I and I think that's something, I know that's something that I do when I'm reading news and I'm hearing perspectives, is I'm like, okay, I hear this thing and I hear this thing being talked about really positively, but something doesn't sit right. What's not sitting right with me? Oh, wait a minute, what about poor people? What about people who, I don't, whatever, throwing out, asking those questions. But yeah, but also being able to build critical thinking skill. Like critical thinking is a skill, and how do you build that? Yeah, please.
Well, I think, one of the things that strikes me about Russia since 2022, I mean, the propaganda was bad before 2022. But then 2022 happens, and what makes it really different from Soviet times, in my mind, is that The government controls all the media, controls all the thinking, uses very repressive forces to keep people under control on the street, but lets people leave. So that if you really hate the regime, you really are in opposition to it, you get to leave. And therefore, you don't keep inside Russia a potential group of people who are going to foster a resistance. Because you let the people who would take leadership roles and they leave. And therefore, you get a kind of leadership vacuum in addition to the incredible repression. And so in Soviet times, what would happen is that, yes, there was repression, yes, there was control of the media, but people couldn't leave. And therefore, when they came home and they sat in their kitchen and were sure that the neighbors weren't listening, or they had to speak very quietly because the neighbors weren't listening, they could very quietly turn on the BBC or Voice of America or Radio Free Europe and listen to news and gather news and then triangulate between that news and what was coming out of Soviet official news. And they could create a way of new thinking about those very issues. And so why was glasnost, right, that policy of openness that Gorbachev created in the late 80s, why was it so successful? Well, it's because all of these people who already had those ideas were sitting in the country and were ready and waiting to start sharing those views and pushing the envelope on censorship more and more and more. And the Putin regime has been very, very smart in, right, essentially getting rid of any potential opposition. It has been incredibly cynical in whom it targets to fill the army to go fight in Ukraine, right? So you're quite correct about the people of Buryatia, in Siberia, right? A small ethnic minority, really being targeted with advertisements for joining the army, and very similar throughout Russia. And so it's really a very different regime right now. I don't know what children who grow up inside this regime are going to be like in 10 years, right? If you're 16 right now, and right since 13 you've had this super heavy propaganda, and in the years before that when you were in school it was bad, right? But there were possible alternative views, and now when all alternative views are essentially criminalized, what is that person going to be like in 10 years? That future decision maker when Mr. Putin will die, right? Because we all do it. So I worry greatly for the future, not only of Ukraine, the massive amounts of trauma that its citizens will go through, but that will be trauma that's recognized. People aren't going to suppress that, right? What's going to happen in Russia with the kind of suppressed trauma and lack of ability to talk? And that's even more frightening of what that society will become like.
Yes, the post-war will be the same as difficult as the war itself. And as you say, those people who are economically incentivized to join the war, they call them the new elites. Because, and as you mentioned, there were people born in Soviet Union empire died in the post-Soviet Russia, but now you have people who were born during Putin and died for Putin, because he's there since 2000 and 2025. People of 20 years, people of age 20 years and older die in this war for Putin. They don't know anything else but Vladimir Putin. That's unfortunate for the whole country.
And just to extend it not only to Russian children, but Ukrainian children forcibly removed by some estimates, 20,000, and there are some estimates much, much larger than that. Ukrainian children that were forcibly removed from territory of Ukraine, taken to Russification spaces within Russia, their names were changed, their identities are hidden, which goes against, it's a human rights violation, and these children are being russificated, and some are tortured, just a lot of horrors that happened in those concentration camps the kids are in. Some children that were rescued talk about the stories of severe atrocities, how it is very important to have completely full and unwavering repetition of the Russian propaganda that is forced upon them. I also work with prisoners of war who returned from Russian captivity. The inhumane, the cruelty that is perpetuated. One would say, is it done because of Putin, or is it done because we allow the human evil to go unchecked? And there is no societal and structural and systemic elements deployed to make sure that the war conducted with some sort of rule, and intimidation and torture and very egregious crimes have been committed against people in captivity. So, and these are the people that have children, or maybe not that old themselves, and they'll be raising the next generation. And then to your point, how are we gonna further, what's gonna happen to the consciousness of the country and society? Now, that's in Russia. And in Ukraine, in territories of Ukraine that have been occupied by the enemy, those territories of Ukraine suffer really greatly. Let's say religion. Back in 1830, if I'm correct, Catherine II is Catherine II was the destruction of Ukrainian state, of Cossack state, and then Orthodoxy was forced upon Ukraine, Russian Orthodoxy in 1830. Now, under the term of Russian Orthodox religion, there is destruction of various other faiths in Ukraine, especially the Baptist, Pentecostal, 67 priests are killed. Over 630 religious buildings are destroyed. Now, what significance of that outside of faith? There is significant that this is where people oftentimes come to hide. This is where civilians congregate. This is where people find place of refuge and safety. And those are targeted, civilians are targeted in this aggression. So 3 years later, it's destruction of the people, destruction of national identity, destruction of the self and their own cultural strengths and what does it mean to be a Russian person, and also destruction of the environment, destruction of the relationships, and there's just layer upon layer of demolition of things that build societies together.
Yeah.
The converting to людоеды, which is the cannibals. It's interesting how in recent years there was always anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in Europe and in Russia especially. But I remember when when Russia attacked Ukraine, someone mentioned to Putin that how can they be Nazis if President Zelensky is a Jew? And he said he's a very bad Jew. Well, he's not good enough as a Jew, something like that. And it was like telling. And I remember this vividly when he said about Russia, about Ukraine. He said, "Нравится, не нравится, терпи, моя красавица," which is, like it or not, whether you like or not, you have to put up. How do you say terpi?
You have to put up with it.
You have to put up with it. And this is in a feminine noun, терпи, моя красавица, which is such a rapist terminology. That he used, and that's why they consider they raping Ukraine as much as they can.
Oof. Thanks. Kiriana, did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah. Well, I just wanted to add on with like the, erasure of like different religions happening in Ukraine and like pushing of like Russian Orthodoxy. It's crazy that it's happening again because, I mean, yeah, my family came from Russia during like, I think it was like the Soviet Union kind of, sometime around then. And like a main part of it was like, erasing like different religions that they didn't want, which included like an older type of like Russian Orthodoxy and stuff. And there's a lot of like fear and stuff when it comes to that. And like the fact that your entire life and a major part of your life gets kind of destroyed and like you get punished for different things that are really deeply important to you is just really sad. And yeah, a lot of people do take refuge from that. So yeah. And also, I just wanted to say, with like when we're talking about propaganda and stuff, it's interesting how it's not just in the news. Like it really is embedded into like everyday life, especially when you're like socializing children. For example, my grandma, my baba, I went to her house and she has some children's books that are in Russian, and it's really strange when I was like translating them to English, because I recognize like the glorification of like the presidents or leaders or like generals and stuff in there, and I was like, wow, this is a kid's book. Like I don't know why they're including like stories of like political leaders in there. It just seems kind of like weird. So yeah, it was just, yeah, like kind of eye-opening, I guess.
Yeah, that's so true that it happened in Ukraine now, but it happened in all the other countries and in Russia mainland of destruction of religious minorities. So it's not really about religion. It is about control. And Russian Orthodox Church has become to be, the current Russian Orthodox Church is an agent, and during USSR it also been the case. So people of faith, Orthodox faiths that are not like that particular Kremlin-approved version of Orthodoxy are not helpful, and they need to be removed, and that life is in danger, and they have been persecuted. So that is not about religion, it's not about faith, it is about control. There will be a very interesting film that will be coming out, and we hope to bring it to Portland. It's called Faith Under Siege. It's will discuss. It's a documentary about this very topic, the impact of the current war upon various religious communities. You can look it up about it, Faith Under Siege, but we hope to have it in Portland in a month or so.
Wow.
It's interesting, the history of specifically old believers here in Oregon, because they came here because they were persecuted during the Peter the Great, and but on a positive note, I just want to, because maybe closing soon. I teach Spanish at CMC, Clackamas Middle College, and many of my students are heritage speakers of Russians and Ukrainians. And I'm glad to see that there is no animosity between my students, and that Russian-speaking community thrives in Oregon, and I'm really glad about that. So that's on a positive note.
Yeah, I mean, something that makes me think about is, and something that we've Elias, Kiriana, and I have talked about, is this idea of like we have these large narratives of like, who likes or who dislikes who, and where fighting is happening, stuff like that. But like, what does that look like on the individual level? Like, Elias, you're not here because you're like, I'm here to spread Russian propaganda, like, right? Like you're just like trying to like live your life and enjoy being alive. And I think about that and the spaces that I'm in, and when I get frustrated, like trying to like bring, we've talked a lot about like humanity and dehumanization today, and I just like, that is something that I remind myself of, and when I'm working with students, trying to remind them of like, where is the humanity in a human being, in human beings we don't like, and in human beings we don't agree with. I can think of some very hateful people, and I'm like, but you like birds, there's your humanity, right? And that can be really hard, but I mean, as we've talked about, it starts with, well, these people X, and those people are bad, and by the way, we have to protect ourselves from those people. We have to get them before they get us. We need to watch out, right? Like, these are some of the things that we've been talking about today. I guess for our closing question, if I can switch topics a little bit, because the big thing that we've been the big thing that the students and I have been talking about is this idea of peace. Like, what does peace look like to you? How do we get to a peaceful future? I anticipate that the six of us will solve the world's problems in this question. But like when you hear that, like when you think about that, and it can be for these two countries, it can just be like in our world. This is today we've picked one conflict to talk about, but there are so many conflicts happening in our world today. So I'm happy for people to answer that in a broad way as well.
I'll start tossing out an idea. In the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine, I think both sides have to fear losing. And if both sides equally fear losing, then you'll get a peace. At the moment, one side has no fear of losing and therefore keeps on fighting, right? And keeps on thinking we can win. Right? And you have to change that calculation of like, this isn't going, there's no win here, right? We have to get to the point where we recognize, and I'm talking about Russia, of course, where they're not going to win, right? How does that happen? That's going to take an awful lot of political effort, right? And I don't see the Trump administration using any of the tools that it has to actually put that kind of pressure on Russia. At the moment, everything seems to be, we're going to get to an end of this war because the United States is going to pressure Ukraine into losing. That's where I see this going, and it is very ugly. It is extremely ugly. It's going to have consequences around the world that I don't even think we're beginning to measure. And yeah, it's mind-blowing, the number of consequences that will flow from that. What to do to get Russia to realize it's losing would be to increase the pressure, right, to start secondary sanctions on everybody who buys Russian oil, right? Because the only resource that Russia really has at the moment that's bringing in money is the oil, right? And if you put secondary sanctions on every bank, every tanker, every insurance company of every tanker that moves Russian oil around the world to India and China, and you use those tariffs that we love so much in those ways, as opposed to, okay, won't go
What's
there.
happening?
As opposed to, period. That would create the kind of pressure that would make Russia run out of money to buy soldiers, to buy weaponry, to buy North Korea, to buy parts of China to actually continue the war effort. But it's that enormous economic problem or pressure that would need to be applied, right? And I just don't see that happening, unfortunately.
And this would be fantastic for U.S. economy, even taking position from perspective of the right. I think that would allow to support United States production of oil, and they would only go to benefit United States. Because right now, when we are negotiating with the bully, there is a victory for Ukraine or there is surrender for Ukraine? Well, surrender for Ukraine would mean a slew of very negative consequences globally, and not only for Ukraine, but also for United States, seeing U.S. as a really weak partner, as weak nation that was not able to secure follow through on the commitment U.S. made when Ukraine surrendered third largest nuclear arsenal in the world in the Budapest Memorandum, and also to continue moving forward as a nation to apply the very stringent sanction, be it oil, be it use of resources. Right now, we have $5 billion of Russian frozen national assets in U.S., and we have like over $230 billion of Russian frozen national assets in Europe. That expiration date, by the point at which they have to be transferred to Ukraine fund, I'm not saying giving a check to Ukraine, but Ukraine support fund needs to happen, I believe, before July. Otherwise, money goes back to Russia. And that's a big problem. So U.S. acting on the $5 billion we have here gives the impetus to Europe. Europe tends to be always watching, did U.S. do it? Okay, we'll do it. So U.S. could do really a lot for the victory of Ukraine by taking those seized $5 billion and putting them to Ukraine fund, then Europe does that too. Some of these things do not cost money, but actually improve U.S. standing. Sending weapons to Ukraine is a financial win for United States. It's definitely a win for Ukraine. Why? Because it helps to fuel U.S. economy. We get rid of some of the old ancient weaponry, but Ukraine is happy to use it up and to use it to fight on the battlefield. And also it allows progress. Ukraine right now is one of the biggest developers of drone and anti-drone systems and the modern warfare to find the solutions in a solvable circumstances in the very different and difficult conditions from any prior wars that we've had. Medicine, the developments of saving the limb with very severe wounds, those developments are really superseding things that we learned in Iraq and Afghanistan because there was a different enemy that U.S. was fighting there as Ukraine is currently fighting on the front lines of Ukraine. So victory for Ukraine and solution means weaponry for Ukraine, it means cohesiveness of thought of U.S. and Europe, and also means severe sanctions and dispelling of propaganda. We as citizens need to be very thoughtful about what media we are consuming and what rhetoric we are repeating, and not checking our sources. The victory for Ukraine is very possible. It's tangible and it's realistic, but it requires a particular investment of fortitude to see this through.
I would just add just something from personal perspective. Speaking about the end of the war, I was 17 years old when the war was at its highest in my former country, and I remember vividly that sense of this will never end. Is it possible to end? The war lasted for 4 years, but I would just add this regarding Russian-Ukrainian war is that Russia already lost. They might kept the territories, but the fact that they became a pariah in the world is defeating for Russia. And I hope the war ends soon and fast, but the post-war will be very difficult for all of these people who live there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's gonna probably be really terrible, and I mean, especially for like people who, like either maybe they're still living in their cities that are bombed, or like they had to move somewhere else, like to the U.S. or anything, because that's really hard. Like having to learn a whole nother language, like English is so difficult. Like I've seen people, like older Russians, like my relatives, trying to learn English, and it's difficult for them. So, and I can only imagine how hard it is for like people like Ukrainians who go here to CCC. You know, they have like English learning classes, but it's like crazy. And like, what if like your family all died and you're just by yourself, or like, you know, you're like giving up your entire life when a war comes. I mean, your childhood, your elementary school, no one ever really imagines it. So I'd imagine like peace would be like, you know, saying no war is like really idealistic thinking, but in general, probably something should, you know, avoid. And I think like peace could also be like looking at other examples of war. So like trying to minimize the amount of wars that happen, you know, looking at conflicts around the world and thinking about it in your own country, being like, okay, so like what happened between them? How did this happen? How can we avoid the same kind of conflict? Like hating your neighboring countries or wanting to take them over, or, you know, labeling their people as like evil, bad, dumb, whatever like that. So I feel like the US could possibly like take some notes from that, maybe do better, because I'm not saying there's gonna be like a war between other countries and us, but like if they start to fall down like a similar path in the future ever, it's like you probably should have like looked at the Ukrainian-Russian war and stuff.
Let's just not forget the contribution the community colleges across this country do for refugees and immigrants from Ukraine. And I can imagine we have ESOL people here. You have substantial numbers of Ukrainian refugees and immigrants, those under temporary protection status, and they're integrating, they're finding jobs, they're thriving in the States too. So, and this is all thanks to the community college like this one. So I'm really glad that we have a ESOL program and that we're helping people. We're helping people grow and integrate and find jobs. And we have many people from Ukraine come that were well-prepared professionals. I had in Chemeketa Community College, I had pilots, doctors. They're all willing to either validate their diplomas or to find another ways of getting professional jobs. So in addition to helping themselves, they're helping this society grow, because very many of them will contribute to this. I mean, all of them, they will contribute to this society. We're getting richer and better because of having people like them here, not just Ukraine, but all over the world. Makes us richer
People in
and
Ukraine
better.
are very interested. Ukrainian people are here, like you said, very interested in pursuing their education, to validating their diploma. Our nonprofit helps Ukrainian refugees here in Oregon, and people I meet, they want to work, they want to be successful, they start businesses. And back to the point of ending the war, the world will be free when we get rid of these psychopathic dictators who are so bent on conquering free people. So we, each individual one of us, we need to fight for our own freedom and right to exist. Take example from Ukraine, just do not back down.
Yeah.
Glory to Ukraine.
Glory, slava Ukraini.
Ilias, do you have thoughts on peace, peaceful future?
Yeah, I just thinking about the word what Dr. I'm sorry, like Dr.
Bill Comer.
Will Comer, yes. I'm sorry. And I think it's really like deep what you said about if both like sides thinking about they gonna lose. So this is probably like the key for like exactly end the world, end the war. So and ideas what I wanna add probably I believe every war they end. So for sure we have like they have like beginning and they have an end whatever it's take. Of course, I like whatever any person, any people wanna go it faster as fast as I can. But really, that we mentioned in the beginning of our like speech, a lot of like politicians, they really have a power. They really have like unlimited resources. They can do whatever they want. But for some reason, for some like universe happened, I don't know, so they don't do that. So because maybe some reason, but I'm really sure. I mean, I'm so like 100% sure that it's war's end. So, but why we do it here, this conversation? Because we want to set like education is important. Important is also critical thinking. So always like just understand everything what's going on around any conflict. So they have like both sides, and like you need to understand. It's a little bit difficult. They just said like something is going wrong. I mean, I just want to set like war's end someday.
Yeah, thanks for that. When I think about a peaceful future, I think about like you know, our world is made up. Like our systems are made up, and like, you know, why don't we make up being on vacation 5 days a week? You know, like why don't we make up just like, you know, eating good food together? I just listen to things that I like to do. Karaoke, that's the thing I like to do. Like, right, you know, but like that could be the world that we live in. And it's not, because we have people who want more, who want to take from others, who want to control others. I want to go to work, and then I want to go home and hang out with my friends and my family. Like, that's what I want to do, and that's what I want for other people. I want people to be able to enjoy that. I want people to be able to practice the religions and the values that they have, and to hold those things. And to be in community, and like that, those are the things that I think about when I think about peace. And I think that comes through, recognizing people's humanity, It's just like comes through and recognizing people's humanity, and then as we've talked about today, questioning, when you're hearing, well, those people, blah blah blah, like, and I'm a person who says those people. I want to be like, I'm on no pedestal here, but and I appreciate the people in my life who question me when I say that. So those are some of the things that I've been thinking about, but. I feel like if you were to take a nail file and like go shing on my fingertips, like that's what we've covered today in this conversation. So fingernail dust. But I want to thank our panelists so much for being here today, especially our two folks who are community members. Amir is a professor here, but coming in from outside the community, they just got an email from the three of us who were like, "Hello, please come and be on this panel." And we promise we're nice. And they said, "Yeah, we'll do it." And we're like, "Oh, great, no convincing required." Yeah, thank you so much. I want to say thank you to Elias and Kiriana, a deep, deep thank you, because this was their idea. They brought this idea I want to be clear. They brought this idea to me a while ago, and they also said, we want to talk about this at our club meeting. We don't know if we're allowed to talk about it at our club meeting or not, but this is what we want to do. And I said, this is not a club meeting conversation. And then they did not have a choice. So, thank you to the two of you for trusting me and for allowing this to be the thing that I think it wanted to be and that it needed to be. Thank you to all of you for taking time today to be here, for being here for an hour and a half. I know that can be a long time when we've got a lot going on, and so it just means so much to us. And thank you to the folks who are online as well. A couple of last things before I let you all go. For the people who are in the room, all the pastries, not the all the pastries, not the coffee. All the pastries are from Roman Russian. It's a little market up in Portland. They're off of Southeast Division and 109th. There might be a place that's closer, but that's what I found when I was looking for a place. So that's where the pastries come from. The coffee comes from Black Ink, which is a coffee shop here in Oregon City, downtown. If you're interested, if you want to keep talking about war or thinking about war, weird thing to say. This is my intro. Next Tuesday at the college, we'll be screening Island Soldier, which is the untold story of Micronesian soldiers fighting for their piece of the American dream and the future of a small island nation. This documentary is going to be taking place next Tuesday, May 6th, from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. in the McLaughlin Auditorium, which is here at Clackamas Community College on our Oregon City campus. I think,
There's another
please.
film. If you talk in films, there is one screening only of Konotopska Vidma, The Witch of Konotop. It's called Witch the Revenge. And it's at 7 p.m., I believe, in Hollywood Theater in Portland. And it's only one screening in Oregon. So if you can come, please come this Sunday to watch it.
You say
If you're familiar-
rich?
Konotopska Witch. It's Witch, W-I-T-C-H, the Witch. Witch the Revenge. And it's an old legend of a Ukrainian woman whose lover was killed, and right now it's put in a modern setting of current war. And it's a horror film, just FYI. So, great time on Sunday night.
Okay, yeah. So thank you again, everybody. Take care of one of another out there, and thanks for being here.